Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today. I'm sitting here on Wednesday. I was able to watch the first episode of Who Killed WCW on Spike. No, it wasn't on Spike. Spike is what the TNN turned into. It's on Vice. That's a throwback right there. Remember when WWE Monday Night Raw used to be on Spike back in the day, and TNA and all that jazz? But Vice. Pretty much your one-stop shop for other wrestling entertainment other than AEW or WWE. Really big fan of the Beyond the Ring series. They've had a lot of good episodes that are sneaky good. Episodes that really I didn't know about wrestling, and really dove deep into them after I saw the episodes. But this Who Killed WCW? I will honestly tell you, I came in with huge expectations. Their commercials, basically a lot of the press. I heard Brian Gewirtz. He was on Cheap Heat, the podcast with Rosenberg. I guess it was today. I listened to it today, at least. And he talked about telling the story that WWE didn't tell you. Like, we're supposed to get the other side of the story if WCW would have won the war, or at least the WCW side of what is going down. Lots of talking heads. I was really surprised to see The Rock. Episode 1, we heard a lot from Eric Bischoff, Kevin Nash, Booker T, Kevin Sullivan, Guy Evans, who wrote the Nitro book. Kind of surprised, kind of not surprised that there was no Brian Alvarez, no Artie Reynolds from the Death of WCW book that came out probably close to 20 years ago now. Meltzer has done stuff Beyond the Ring. I really thought they would have got his side of the story. They get a lot of flack for writing that book because, you know, it's not Dave Meltzer. I think it's finally came out that Eric Bischoff, all the negative press that he did about that book, he's never even read the book, never even tried. That came out after the whole StarCast ordeal with him and RD having their debate out there at the StarCast shows. But I can honestly tell you the first episode was nothing more of the Nitro coming to be with Eric Bischoff. Getting asked, well, first of all, it was like Eric Bischoff getting his job in the company after leaving the AWA and Vern Gagne and getting the job to be an executive and not really know what WCW was before he even went there to be an announcer. He was an outside source to get it. Just basically they wanted to give the job to somebody that wasn't a wrestler with a wrestling mind. He had a mind for sales, and they said, why not? It can't be worse than what they're doing now. And him, bringing in Hulk Hogan, and then Ted Turner still not being satisfied with being the number 2 company, and Bischoff being backed in the corner to basically say that he needs the show to go up against Monday Night Raw, and Turner giving him 2 hours of TNT to go right up against Monday Night Raw and give us the birth of the Monday Night War. He's got Hogan there, and that's kind of what they're building off of, and them hitting a home run with the NWO storyline. They don't really go into where the NWO storyline came from, who thought it up, where it comes from. There's a few different thoughts. Some people say that it was blatantly ripped off from Japan, who was running a closed storyline at the time. Some people say that it was thought up by Kevin Sullivan. And some people say that Eric Bischoff, dreamed it up when Kevin Nash as well as Scott Hall signed with the company, that they would try and make it look like WWE was invading. But they just build up the NWO. They get us pretty much to Sting and Starrcade. And I'll tell you the truth, there was nothing in this episode that wasn't in the rise and fall of WCW. I keep on thinking that's not the name of the documentary that WWE came out with. There's really nothing. It's almost like you just copy and pasted from being there. That came out roughly in the early 2000s, Kevin Nash would have been with the company. So I'm pretty sure he's one of the talking heads there. We've all seen the Eric Bischoff Monday Night Raw episode interview that they've run 1,000 times on 1,000 different documentaries. The one thing that they were really touching on is they really wanted everybody to know in the early days of WCW that Diamond Dallas Page worked there, Scott Hall worked there, and Kevin Nash worked there all at the same time. DDP, the way I worded it in the tweet really wasn't exactly the way they wanted it to be. That all three of those guys were nowhere close to over in the early days of WCW. DDP ran a really good storyline where he lost all of his riches. He regained them after winning the what was the name of that gimmick? It was some sort of like ring. It was like, it wasn't the king of the ring, but the winner actually wore a ring, a lot like the one that MJF won in AEW. That was kind of like when he got it back on track. And, you know, he just kept plugging away and he kept trying hard. He was like the little engine that could, the guy that wouldn't die. And the NWO storyline is what really got him over as being one of the main guys at WCW. That he gained a lot of his success. I don't know how many times he was a WCW champion. I want to say it was like 2, 3. It could have been more the way they were hot potatoing that belt around. But I can really remember twice him winning that belt and really meaning something. Scott Hall wrestled as the Diamond Stud. He was managed by DDP. I don't think he was ever anywhere close to over, and they showed 1,000 different gimmicks that Kevin Nash had. They gave him his first break. He came in, he was Oz, Vinny Vegas. He was a member of the Master Blasters. I can't remember what his name was in that tag team, but none of those were over. To the point where he just walked in and told Kevin Sullivan that he wanted his release after he had been contacted by the WWF, that they wanted to bring him in and be the muscle to Shawn Michaels. You know, Nash just went in and said he wasn't making enough money. He was going to go back to working in the strip clubs and, provide for his family. And they just, okay, see you later. Gave him his release, and next thing you know, he's, showing up and being the bodyguard for Shawn. They took the time to build him up as Diesel. He actually started wrestling. He won the Intercontinental title. Teamed up with Shawn to become Dudes with Attitudes. Him and Shawn started a storyline where basically Shawn was starting to get jealous of him. Diesel goes off and wins the WWF title before Shawn Michaels does. They main event WrestleMania against each other. It took all of that to make Kevin Nash the star that he is now, and he made a lot of money for WWF. He made a lot more for WCW. The one thing is, when they touched on Starrcade, they talk to Bret Hart, who talks about the finish. They don't even bring up how Bret came to be in WCW. They don't need to go over the Montreal. They don't need to go over the screw job. They don't need they need to talk about how big of a free agent signing Bret Hart was. Even though he sort of got into a lot of trouble with Vince and Shawn and wanted his way out, WCW didn't have to sign him. It's not like Bret was going to go to ECW or go wrestle in Japan, but it still took a lot of money to sign him. And they didn't even really talk about the fact that Turner gave Eric Bischoff basically a blank check, to the point where he had so many wrestlers under contract that he could have an event called World War III where they could have 90 guys wrestle in the main event. And some of those guys didn't even wrestle on the undercard. So they were fresh for the main event. So they probably had like 100 guys plus, not even developmental guys and guys that were injured at the time. That's a huge roster for a company, for any wrestling company that even has a 3-hour show. on Mondays, even when they had the point where they had the 2-hour show on Thursdays, they had the 1-hour show on the weekends. How are you going to get all those guys on there? They were wasting a lot of money. But I'm going to give it its chances. Just as a 4-part series, I think they kind of wasted the first one. I know you got to set the table, but I was kind of looking for a lot more jazz. I was looking for a lot more meat on the bone. I'm really looking forward to the last episode, about the last episode of Monday Nitro, when they actually kill it. But I don't know. I'll tell you the truth. It was pretty much the same thing as watching the rise and fall of WCW in there. And let me know if that's what you guys think, because I don't know. I didn't get a ton. Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today. It is summertime. I'm home from softball. I think it's like 9 o'clock at night. Tonight was night 2 of the Who Killed WCW doc on, hey, I told you to keep that on Vice. I was kind of skeptical about the first episode of the documentary. It kind of wasn't as good as the WWE version. I honestly didn't think it went over all that well with me. Episode 2, honestly, very, very good. Episode opened with talks about Bret the Hitman Hart. I was yelling at the documentary, tell us who Bret is. Tell us how big of a deal it is that Bret signed to come to WCW. They answered that very fastly, but they still really haven't explained how big of a deal Bret Hart was to come to WCW. He was hand-delivered easily. If not their number 1, their number 2, maybe their number 3 guy of WWE. That is like the number 3 guy at Coke being handed to Pepsi. Basically being like, hey, I know that we're in an all-out war right now, but this number 3 guy just isn't cutting it anymore. And if you want him, you can have him. Everybody knows that, Bret at one point was the big star for WWF. Vince wanted to keep him, didn't think he had enough money to keep him. He was falling, he was falling in the ratings. It was a bad time for wrestling. Titan Towers, and WWE was making all kinds of cutbacks. They took the water coolers out of the towers and things like that. And Bret and Vince made a deal that it was like a 20-year deal to keep him in the company for as long as he wanted to wrestle, and to keep him around as long as he wanted to be there on the other side, helping out the company. One thing led to another. Bret fell out of favor. Shawn became the number 1 guy. And, Vince came to Bret and said, hey, I can't pay you. We're just basically going to cut the deal. If you can go to WCW, see if they can give you the same deal or a better deal, and take it. That's it. Austin was heating up. Undertaker was dependable. Shawn right there was the number 1 guy. But that was a risk for Vince to cut ties with Bret and just say, you know what, you and Shawn just are not getting along. We can't have business where, the top 2 guys can't have matches because you guys can't get along. You guys can't decide who's going to pass the belt back and forth. And we can't, make Undertaker a transitional champion every single time we want to pass this belt back and forth. It's a real big deal that basically, Bret leaves and goes to WCW, and almost instantaneously at the Royal Rumble, Shawn Michaels, gets injured. It's a back injury that would take him out of wrestling for, I believe, 6 years. He would do the job to Austin. Austin becomes the number 1 guy in the company. But none of that's set in stone. And you're going to tell me you're going to take Shawn Michaels off the table and, you're not going to need Bret. That's just surprising. I think Bret Hart is huge to the Monday Night War deals. And the fact that WCW couldn't deliver ratings or any kind of storyline with Bret. He never really got anything going. To this day, I was the biggest NWO fan that I know. I still don't know why Bret joined the NWO. He came, he debuted. He was the tag team guy. He stopped the bad count at Starrcade, so he went against Hogan, and then just months later, just is walking out on TV with Hogan, helping him out, and sitting on the car with Eric Bischoff wearing the NWO shirt. I didn't get it then. I still don't get it now. No clue. But Bret, to me, honestly, he's not my number one. He's not my number, in my top 10. Maybe in my top 10. But that's debatable. And I know there's people out there, like my best friend, Freaking Yay 88, and if he hears this, he's going to send me a shot. But I understand it, because I think he's up there on his list. Bret is the one guy in the wrestling business that came from the wrestling business. His father owned a wrestling company. Bret talks about wrestling like he really believes he won those matches. He talks about he beat Austin. He beat Taker. Somebody told him to win those matches. That's why he won them. It could have been anybody else. It was his work ethic. It was his wrestling skills. It was his promo ability, and basically his good looks that got him into the spot that he was in. Those are the things that he should really harp on. That is why he's there. When he talks about the wrestling business, when he talks about WWF, when he talks about WCW, he talks about basically like he was in those fights like they were real. I don't get it. From there we go to Goldberg. And Goldberg talking about, basically, it's the first time I've ever really heard Goldberg admit he didn't know what he was doing and that he was green. They talked about the match, him and Scott Hall on Monday Nitro, the same night as the Hulk Hogan match in Atlanta. It was kind of like a surprise. They told us on Thunder that the match was going to happen. It was going to be a dark match. Then all of a sudden it became a TV match. And then as you're watching Nitro, they throw up that Goldberg is going to have to go through Scott Hall in order to get the match against Hogan later that night on Nitro. Enough for you to be like, oh shit, maybe he's going to lose. Maybe they're going to screw him. Maybe it's going to be an NWO takeover. Maybe that's why this was on Nitro and it's not on a pay-per-view. And we're not going to get Goldberg versus Hogan tonight. I think it was just to drive ratings as a surprise of like, oh shoot, we got to keep it on Nitro to see what's going on. Goldberg was the biggest thing in wrestling in 1998 besides for Stone Cold Steve Austin. Goldberg was so over, he should have been able to do something with that company. I think honestly at the time it was the 3-hour show. I think it's what's killed WWE Monday Night Raw to this day. I think it's killed SmackDown. When it was 3 hours, it's too long to sit in front of your television. It's the same thing that I have to say about AEW pay-per-views. Yes, you're getting your money's worth, but it's too damn long. I think a 2-hour show, you can have two 2-hour shows in the same week. You can do Raw, you can do SmackDown, you can do Nitro, you can do Thunder. I think Thunder was even a 1-hour show back in the day. And then you can give us the 3-hour pay-per-view. But all of that doesn't make any sense. And it's just too much. They talked about it later in the show when they talked about I was going to try and reveal this at the end. The overall basis, I don't even know what the title of the show was, but to me, this was the Eric Bischoff era of Nitro that they were covering. I thought that this was a better documentary than the Eric Bischoff documentary that WWE made, even though it was only 1 hour. They sort of touched on it in episode 1 where Eric came from, in the AWA with Vern selling Star Wars. And that led to him, getting a job as a third announcer in WCW. didn't really cover that well how he became the president of the company so fast. It's just basically like he did a good interview, and even though he was an announcer in the company, he wasn't in the wrestling business. He wasn't a wrestler, and that's not who they wanted running the company, was another wrestler. They figured that, they've tried Ric Flair, they tried Dusty Rhodes. They needed something different to get him over the hump to be more of a competition for WWF and Vince McMahon at the time. But I thought, honestly, the episode was really, really good. The next episode is going to be covering Vince Russo. That one, honestly, should be really, really fun. I was able to be at 2 of the Nitro events they talked about on this show. I was at Hogan versus Goldberg at the Georgia Dome. I was at the Finger Poke of Doom. Both of those were really, really good shows. Honestly, the Hogan show had 40,000 people, yes. The Finger Poke of Doom, WCW was still over. They were starting to slip. They were starting to lose the battle. The place was still full, but I just don't think it was 40,000 people. I was a big NWO fan, a big Kevin Nash fan. I was stunned at the Finger Poke of Doom, but the fact that the NWO was coming back together. We had the original NWO, Kevin Nash, and screw it. There we go. Kevin Nash, the Macho Man. They didn't really think things were going for them, so they split off. They made the Wolf Pack, and they had made wars. They had tried to do Scott Hall versus Kevin Nash a few times, but I don't think they ever really had a real big Kevin Nash versus Hulk Hogan match. So you never really saw the real big NWO versus NWO match. They did things like the War Games when they had the 3 different teams. They had NWO, NWO Wolfpack, Team WCW. They did a Battle Royal on MTV where it was like Snow Bowl or Battle Snow. It was something MTV-ish where they put the NWO B team in the Wolfpack and Goldberg in a Battle Royal in the snow. So we had kind of seen it, but you never really got the real battle. So to have the NWO under one roof, even though it caused a division of the NWO Wolfpack and the NWO B team of guys like Virgil, Stevie Ray, mostly the NWO Hollywood guys that got left behind, minus Hogan, minus Scott Steiner. Mr. Perfect kind of was on one team and then drifted over to the B team. I guess he was not too old, not hip enough, I guess. Luger is another guy. They wouldn't have put him on the B team, but I didn't understand him being in that version. I was just so pumped to get them back that I thought it was really, really cool. The fact that they talked about Goldberg versus Kevin Nash at Starrcade 1998, I can tell you that I bought that on pay-per-view. Kevin Nash was over. Kevin Nash as a babyface to go up against Goldberg, I thought was a really good match. As a wrestling fan, as somebody who purchased WCW pay-per-views and watched Nitro, I felt that Nitro and WCW never really put up a good enough competitor for Goldberg that you believed in. The fact that they were taking the strap off of Kevin Nash and putting it on Goldberg, I thought was a real good kick in the pants for them and put them in another direction. The one thing that they talked about in this is that they didn't have another direction for Goldberg to go. That's where the Finger Poke of Doom came into play, with him being arrested for stalking Miss Elizabeth. And even though they set up a storyline where basically it was going to be Goldberg was going to have to defeat members of the NWO to get to Hogan for him to get his belt back. I think that was the storyline that was starting. On Thunder, Goldberg ended up going in the back and trying to beat up a limousine that the NWO was in, and he cut a tendon in his arm, and he was injured and he wasn't able to wrestle. So we never even able to see that storyline start to see where it was going to go. But if you remember, like Randy Orton versus CM Punk at WrestleMania 26, Orton each week on the way to WrestleMania eliminated one person from Nexus. So it wouldn't be Orton versus 7 guys come WrestleMania. It would be a one-on-one match. So I think that's basically where they were going with Goldberg versus the NWO to get them in a new direction, but we were never able to get there. But the fact that WCW had Bret the Hitman Hart, they had Kevin Nash, who, Big Sexy, who that dude was the man. I don't care what you say, 5 Moves of Doom or anything like that. That guy was over. That guy was cool. Even when he got the book from Eric Bischoff to be the booker of WCW, I think that Bischoff believed in him because Kevin Nash was somebody that knew mainstream what was going on in the world. He knew what the hot topic was. He knew what was cool and was going to be able to point them in the right direction. But there was so many people in the Time Warner or AOL Time Warner company that was pointing WCW in the wrong direction on purpose, that I think at that point you were able to see the doom that was coming. I think that people believe they could get it back on track. I think that's why Russo's got to come in next week. But I don't know. Bischoff did a lot of good for WCW. The NWO was great. Conan talked about the luchadors getting a push. That was something that we had never seen before. WWF was a big man territory. They tried the cruiserweight division, like with S.A. Rios and Taka Michinoku, that, was pushed on television for a hot minute, and it was done. They kept that belt around. I mean, S.A. Rios, Taka Michinoku was that champion for, felt like an eternity. I don't even know when he defended that belt, but they still had him come out with it. I think that was probably on, the pre-shows of pay-per-views and things like that. They didn't push that type of wrestler. They didn't show that type of wrestling. If you weren't, the 6'5" with muscles guy, or you were like the big fat guy, they just didn't have room for you. It just wasn't what that company was done. But he made a lot of money. He put that company on the back. He turned a profit with a company that never turned a profit before. Eric Bischoff, one of the biggest names there is in wrestling, WWF Hall of Famer, should be a TNA Hall of Famer. He's never going to see the AEW Hall of Fame, even that thing comes around, but he can't get along with Tony. But I don't know. Damn good podcaster. I appreciate him. Thank you very much. We'll get into Vince Russo next week. Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Reach coming to you here today. It is summertime. There's too many kids in the house, so we find ourselves outside in the truck. Let's talk some WCW. Tonight was week 3 of Who Killed WCW. As we saw last week, by the end of the show, this was going to be the Vince Russo episode of the show. I'll tell you the truth. This episode of Who Killed WCW jumped the shark a little bit for me today. Very good episode. Just talked a lot about those dog days of WCW that we all watched, that we all don't really want to look back upon, with a lot of, great memories. I think everybody can kind of pick things out of there. I think, honestly, the one show that they were in Denver, they took a week off. They just ran a rerun of Nitro. It was like a best of. Then they came back. They were in Denver, I can remember. They started out the show with pretty much the whole roster in the ring wearing suits. It was the coming together of Russo and Bischoff. They were going to work together. They kind of said they were going to clear the path of where WCW was, and they were going to completely start over. They took the week off to basically get their ideas in line, to plan where they were going to be going, and have a purpose to where they were booking the foreseeable future. They stripped all the champions of every of a class at that time. I believe Sid was the champion, and then probably like I can't remember the other guys who the titles off. They took titles even from the New Blood guys, and just said, "Hey, we're going to start over." I thought that had a chance. The New Blood versus the Millionaires Club. We all knew that guys like Hogan, Flair put people over. I can give that to them. Flair put a lot of people over in his career. But we can just point the finger at Hogan. Hogan was not going to be putting over Billy Kidman to make him the next big star. They wanted Billy Kidman to be a star. That's why they put him in the ring with Hogan. But this whole episode, this whole Who Killed WCW? I'm not putting the blame on Hulk Hogan. I don't think WCW would have been the company that it was remembered for if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan going there. But his, his creative control card that he held this whole time he was in WCW was a main storyline of Who Killed WCW. When they talked about the Screwjob match with him and Jarrett at Bash at the Beach 2000, I was surprised that was the first time it got brought up. I was surprised it didn't get brought up more. But that quite possibly could have been one of the things. But I think a lot of people really understand that they wouldn't have been the company they were if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan, when he came into the company, jumped WCW. It didn't go to the heights that they thought it was going to be. Definitely when Hulk joined the NWO, it boosted the company as well as boosted the group. And the fans that they had until the dying days. I think, you might have been booing Hollywood Hulk Hogan at the time and saying you wanted something different, but he was the guy that, they were supporting and buying merch for until the day they died. And even when he dusted off the red and yellow and brought it back, it wasn't the biggest pop in the world, but the people wanted to see Hulk as babyface Hulk again, even though I think he went back to Hollywood before his dying days there. But main storylines that they covered today was Russo coming into the company, him saying that, him making the call to see if they were interested in bringing him in might have been what got Bischoff excused from his job, because they might have thought that he was a hot free agent from WWF. He gets a lot of praise for the Attitude Era. He wrote a lot of good segments. I have always thought that Vince was probably a really good buffer for him, as well as the rest of the writing team, but he really feels that he was the main writer for WWF, and he was the one who, went out there and got Stone Cold, Rock, Undertaker, Triple H, Kurt Angle. He really feels that he is the guy who got all of those guys over, and he is fully responsible for that. He said that Vince came to him and told him that he was going to have to start writing Raw as well as SmackDown. Did not offer him a raise. He already felt that he was stressed out and overworked, that he quit WWF, and he called his inside sources at WCW, and that's what led to him getting the job and him coming in. It does not make sense to me. I do understand he is cashing out. He got a big deal, much more than Vince was paying him to jump to WCW. But at that time, WCW had Nitro, WCW had Thunder, so they had two shows as well. He didn't say it, but maybe it was just the money that they paid him was worth to do 2 shows, and if Vince would have paid him the same, he would have stayed. I do believe that he wanted to be in charge. He wanted to feel like it was his own. When Vince Russo first came into the company, he kind of swore to himself that he would stay off of TV. He would not be the Vince McMahon. He had the backstage skits where I don't even think it was his hands at the table, but that was basically all you ever saw was like their hands inside the Booker room, and they had sort of like things worked out around him. Like La Parka was the chairman of WCW. He'd always be hanging out in the office when certain guys went in there and stuff like that. But where was I before the light came on? I don't know. By the end, Vince was making him the main guy on the show. He was wrestling in matches. Storylines were basically all set up around him. He was not a wrestler. He really took shots at Goldberg, saying that when Goldberg gave him the spear out of the three steel cages on top of each other that they called war games, that he thought he was trying to hurt him himself. Vince Russo wrote the segment. Vince Russo told Goldberg to spear him out of there. Goldberg didn't look at him and just like spear the guy out of the ring. It was Vince Russo's responsibility to know that Goldberg was going to hit him with a spear. He was going to fall backwards. He already knew he wanted to fall out of the cell. Why didn't he make sure that he had enough room to fall down without hitting his head off of the barricade between the fans and him? I think that's 100% on Vince Russo, not on Goldberg. Goldberg did what he told him to do. Goldberg didn't go into business for himself and do that all on his own. The Goldberg deal, I don't know. Vince swears that if Goldberg had the chance, he would hurt him all on his own. I don't get that. They talked about the fact that Bash at the Beach 2000. Well, no, hold on. We'll start with talking about the David Arquette title change. David Arquette won the championship on an episode of Thunder. It was a tag team match, DDP and David Arquette against Eric Bischoff and Jeff Jarrett. He ended up pinning Eric Bischoff in the tag team match. The stipulation was whoever scored the pin became the champion. And, it was a match set up, I guess, to show the match between DDP and Jarrett, but he ended up getting the pinfall. It sort of put off that it's Tony Schiavone's idea, that he gave it to Vince Russo, and Vince Russo still thinks that, it was in the USA Today, so it was worth the publicity of people talking about how crazy it was that David Arquette became the WCW champion. I don't think he brought in any new fans. I am a fan of the movie Ready to Rumble. I don't believe many fans are. I don't think they found any new wrestling fans from Ready to Rumble. I don't think anybody rented that or went to the theater, saw the movie, was surprised it was a wrestling movie, and said, hey, I'm going to check out, Nitro. They didn't portray wrestling fans that well, even though wrestling fans were the main character of that movie. They went more comedy-centric, and I don't think it really worked. Whoever made the deal to get that movie, I think, was probably looking out for themselves. There's many people who thought that Eric Bischoff got that deal. Eric Bischoff was supposed to play the head booker in the movie. Maybe Eric Bischoff was looking out for himself, thinking he could get a movie role. Not really quite sure. Must have been a hell of a payday or something like that. But I don't know. It didn't really work out well. I own the DVD. Hopefully WCW made some money off of that. But, probably the way it would happen for WCW, wherever that money went, got tied up in Turner Home Entertainment or something like that, and WCW never saw any money at the end of the day. That leads to Jarrett getting the championship back during a DDP versus Jarrett pay-per-view match. The next pay-per-view would be Bash at the Beach. They would do Hollywood Hulk Hogan going up against Jeff Jarrett as a part of the New Blood feud. Hollywood Hogan said that he wanted to win that match because of his creative control. He didn't really understand what was going on in the company. Didn't want to do the favors for Jeff Jarrett. Didn't really feel like it was the screw job worked for him, brother. And they do the screw job, or basically like Russo's like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to put up with this Hulk Hogan bull crap anymore. Even though Hulk has an ironclad contract, he has creative control. They basically think if they piss him off, he'll go away. They don't really care about, the fallout from this, whether if it's, Bischoff's not going to work there anymore, whether if it is, going to be a lawsuit. Russo just wanted himself to have creative control of this company. I think he was calling Brad Siegel all the time, trying to see, who was in charge, whether if it was Bischoff, whether it was him, fighting back and forth. And I think, Siegel was just getting tired of answering these calls and just was like, Vince, do whatever you want. They go out there. The only problem with me, they've always said for years that this is this is a real situation that really happened. There was lawsuits that came out of it. It had to be true. If you go a year beforehand, Halloween Havoc 1999, there's a match, Sting versus Hogan for the championship. Hogan walks out, lays down in the ring. Same exact thing that Jarrett did. If you're going to do this, it just makes you think that's just the way it works. It's like on Nitro when they're having the Steiner, Nash, and Goldberg triple threat match, and the announcers are saying that Goldberg is going off script. He's not doing what the writers are telling him to do. If you're going to expose that side of the business, we're going to think that you're always going to be exposing that side of the business. It just didn't work. It was crazy. It was nuts. Of course, after that, they end up doing Booker T versus Jeff Jarrett to find out who the new WCW champion is going to be. Booker T gets his first push. He can really thank, David Arquette, because David Arquette kind of said in a promo on Nitro that, Booker T should be a guy that holding that championship. He shouldn't be a guy holding it. Vince Russo is the guy that, pointed at him and said, hey, he's going to be the champ. He's going to be the guy. First time getting the strap. And Booker doesn't really even have nice things to say about Russo. So for Booker T not to be a Russo guy, he gave him the first push. He gave him his first championship. He went on to win 5 titles in the company. He's a WWE Hall of Famer. I don't understand that. And so that's why I don't really jump on the Russo train. I understand he had a big, to do in wrestling. He really helped WWE. He was a main guy for WCW, but he's not, on my mantle of wrestling legends. He's just sort of a character that was there along the way. Next week, they're going to get into Bischoff trying to buy the company back, the last Nitro. I have a lot of questions about that time. I was really watching WCW at that time. I'm not saying I wasn't watching Raw at the time, but I really have good memories of WCW 2001. I think that Sullivan was really getting the, it was bringing back wrestling. And you can say what you want to, that they lost some of the best wrestlers they had when they had the, gosh darn it, what was their name? It was mostly the Filthy Animals. What was their name when they jumped to freaking WWE? I can't think of what their name is, but it's, Eddie Guerrero, Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, and Chris Benoit. You can say you lost, some of your best wrestlers because they didn't believe in what Kevin Sullivan was doing. But to me, those last few Nitros, it's not great. It's not going to be better than what WWF was doing at the time, but I thought it was good wrestling. They had like the Fabulous 6, Fabulous 7, the Ric Flair group of heels that he was managing. If WCW would have went 6 more months, I would have watched it. I guarantee you that. So I am looking forward to next week. There's a lot of stuff. When this is all done, we'll do a big WCW talk about everything that went down. Love to hear what Vince, what Jim Nye is thinking about this. Hopefully he's watching this on Hulu. In my mind, I think right now, I bet you he isn't even watching it. I don't know if he doesn't have Hulu or he doesn't know where to watch him on YouTube. Hopefully, Morgan MC is sending them to him. But I thought it was a good episode. It just happened to be a documentary on wrestling that most of us like to forget. That's just the way it goes. Peace out. Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today. It just came down to the conclusion of Who Killed WCW, the 4-part miniseries, docuseries, I guess, on WCW's dying days. All in all, I honestly was very critical of the first episode of the documentary. I really thought that they should have just started like breaking right into it and giving us a lot of facts that we haven't heard. Jim Ross has a podcast, Kevin Nash has a podcast, Bruce Pritchard has a podcast, Eric Bischoff has a podcast. WWE has made the Monday Night Wars docuseries. They made the Monday Night War DVD documentary, the rise and fall of WCW. We've seen a lot of documentaries on this, and for them to bring this out and break out a 4-part series, especially from the people from beyond the dark side of the ring. Sometimes I refer to it as the beyond the ring, for some reason. I really thought that this was going to be monumental stuff. In the long run, I thought they had some good footage. They got some good new interviews. Because we've seen like the Eric Bischoff building the Monday Night Raw set in 2002. We've seen that that footage, that interview, thousands of times. It has been reclipped and recycled. And sometimes you even hear it as just the audio, and you already know exactly what he's going to say because we've heard it so many times. This last episode that focused mainly on the last days of WCW was told kind of in a sad tone, as almost as like the wrestling company passing away, like a wrestler at that time, passing away or something like that. But this was a company, so it was weird. But they would tell stories of the people that were on the crew. Pruitt, is it Nick Pruitt? He was like one of like the behind the scenes producers that directed the show. He had a podcast before the Nitro book came out, where he told a lot of behind the scenes WCW stories. It wasn't great, but it was really good. He talked about the fact that a lot of these people they had worked for Turner Sports. They had been a part of the WCW family, shooting Nitro and Thunder. Where were these people gonna go to get work? And the way that he put it was, this took, half parts, what did he say? He said half part something, half part army. It's not your, half circus, half army. It's not your normal job that you're able to just walk in and fill out an application and be out there on the road. Whether if you were, a camera guy, whether if you're a producer, whether if you were an assistant, whether if you were in the food stuff, in catering, It took a whole mountain of men and women to basically put that whole show together. Guys who drove the trucks, crazy stuff. But they told the timeline, basically, of Eric Bischoff saying, "Hey, would you like me to go out and find a buyer for WCW?" AOL Time Warner basically told Bischoff that they don't, sell things in their company. They just go out and they buy things. They talked about the merger of AOL, Time Warner, Turner, coming all together. It was a deal at the time that made a lot of sense because AOL was such a big company, with them being big into the internet at the time, and it was people's first step into the internet. People really didn't know about. I don't even know if there was like AT&T or anything else out there. AOL was the first time I ever got on the internet. I thought AOL was the internet. I thought basically it was just chat rooms. And then you could go to sites, but I really didn't even know what sites were. I don't even think there was a, no, because I would go on and I would buy stuff from like WWEshop.com and like World Championship Wrestling.com. They didn't even own WCW.com. Somebody else had bought it, and that company was too cheap to go out and try and acquire the rights to it. I remember you had to actually type in World Championship Wrestling.com every time you wanted to go on their website. Bizarre. I haven't thought about that in years. But I guess I'm getting kind of mixed up. When I got my first computer and we got AOL, that was probably 95, 96. And that was the first time I had ever gotten on AOL. I really didn't know what I was doing. I mainly was just going on there, going in chat rooms and things like that, like I said. And when I would go to websites, I don't even know what I was really looking at or what I was really doing. Internet, I guess, I don't even really know when it changed to just going on like Internet Explorer or anything like that. I don't know. I'm kind of lost right there on how the internet changed. But this episode was, I gotta get back on track here. I apologize. But basically after a few months of just losing more money, they called Eric Bischoff back and basically said, would you be able to find a buyer if it was on the table for us to sell WCW? And he made a few contacts, where he came into contact with Fugent Media. I was always under the impression that Eric Bischoff, he was in control of the company because he was going to buy it. Fugent Media is the company that created Classic Sports Network, which ESPN bought, and then made ESPN Classics. I don't know if he was going to be part of the deal, like he was going to sell it and then he was going to step in and he was just going to be the guy who just continued running it, so he would have a job with the new company, or if they were just going to buy it and take it off in a new direction. I don't know if Fugent was looking to buy it and even keep running it, or if they just wanted to create what was now known as the WWE Network, and have like a wrestling network. They just wanted the old footage, or maybe they would, no, because they didn't have it anymore. So I mean, they wouldn't, unless they were going to sell the footage to WWE, unless they would take the WCW footage and then sell it to ESPN to be able to put it on the ESPN network, the ESPN Classics. Like they'd make another deal. Maybe that's what they were thinking of. ESPN Classics still shows the old AWA that they showed way back in the day, and I don't know if they get huge ratings on that, but maybe they would have got better ratings if they were able to show Funk versus Flair, or Flair versus Sting, Harley Race versus Ric Flair. Maybe those matches, would have drawn in more and more viewers. But then again, I think they make most of their viewers on ESPN Classic watching the Lakers versus Celtics, the old Yankees games with Reggie Jackson, things like that. Things that seem to always be on the network when I flip by it and check it out. But basically then, when they had almost made a deal for Fusion to buy it, one of the things in the contract that for the sale is that they were guaranteed to keep their time slot on TBS and TNT Monday and Thursday, 8 p.m., 2 hours for 2 years. Basically, the leader, Brad Siegel, of Turner, just said, you know what, we're gonna break away from wrestling. That's not part of this deal, and that killed the deal. At that point, there was nothing to be saved, and that's when Eric Bischoff calls in on the second to last Nitro, says they've hit some roadblocks, doesn't even know what's going to be going down, but as the leader of WCW at that point, he wants to go out and put on the best show that he can. And that's when they advertised the last Nitro from Panama City. And then in the coming days to that is when WWE makes a deal and buys the company for $4 million. They acquire all of the logos, all of the trademarks. Some of the rosters contracts are picked up, and a lot of the big ones are not. That's why, when it comes to the Invasion, you don't see guys other than DDP and Booker T. You don't see Goldberg, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Hulk Hogan, Goldberg. All of those big guys are sitting at home because the new company that Turner had to create to cover the contracts that they signed was only offering 50 cents on the dollar. And the offers that WWE was giving these guys to come in was a downsize guarantee. WCW would give your money all at once. Didn't matter how many shows you worked, didn't matter how many pay-per-views, didn't matter how much merch you sold. There was no merch bonuses. WWE sells you on a downsize guarantee as an opportunity, and if you take care of that opportunity, you're always going to make more. What is more? You never know until you get there. But I think there was guys in WCW making big money that didn't need to make it, but I would bet that Austin, Rock, Triple H, Undertaker, Kane, those guys were probably making more than WCW guys were because of how ticket sales were doing, pay-per-views were doing, and just they could sell anything at that time. WWE toothbrush, WWE wallet, WWE socks, just about the way it is now. I mean, that boom felt like it was bigger, but today's wrestling is pretty mainstream with AEW, with WWE. I see stuff everywhere, but maybe not as much. Like when I go to Hot Topic, I don't really see the pro wrestling t-shirts or the WWE shirts. It seems like those have faded out. They don't really carry them at the mall anymore, but I'm really not at the mall that much, so I don't know. I know where to get my shirts if I need to get shirts, you know what I mean? But sad day for WCW to close up shop. $4 million was almost next to nothing, but then again, AOL Time Warner is able to take that loss off their books. They're already saying they don't want to have it on TNT and TBS. I don't know who got those time slots, if it's just like Seinfeld reruns and a brand new TNT drama that they bought to put on Monday nights to try and bring up ratings. But we all know the story that basically millions and millions of people watched wrestling. And we don't know if it's just people got double counted or if basically the next Monday nobody turned on to watch WCW, so they just started watching something else, and those wrestling fans just all went away. When WCW closed, the wrestling circle got smaller. This was not a part of the whole thing, but TNA would debut the next year in 2002. they were always like the little engine that could until around 2005. It always seemed like there was always a rumor that, the TNA was running out of money. They didn't have enough viewers. They needed TV. It wasn't until the Panda came around in the Carter family and started investing in them, and they got Spike TV, then they really started running with it. But, the wrestling business is not what it once was, and it's because WCW closed. And it was Sunday. It sucked. I was surprised when the last Nitro started with Vince McMahon out there. I might have heard the wrestling rumor an hour beforehand or something like that WWE had bought it and it was the last Nitro. But that whole night, I was really surprised to see what was going down. And the behind-the-scene footage, I don't know where they got it from, it was kind of sad. You see the notes on the wall, like, to fill out the form so the lady can make the AOL email chain to send pictures and keep up to date with people, see where they're going. I mean, these are real family members. If you think if your work just closed tomorrow, there's people there that you're never going to see again. Never. You're never going to see some people that you work with if your work closed tomorrow. You go through your life seeing them, 4 or 5 days a week, and something happens like that, and everybody's gone. It sucks. It made you think about the people in the back more than what was going out there. But Eric Bischoff got closure in this episode for what he did for that company, how he came in, how he boosted it up with Hulk Hogan and the NWO, and things might have got crazy when he was there, and he got fired, he got brought back, and he left, and then he came back again, but he meant a lot to the wrestling business, and I know he kind of went into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2021, kicking and screaming. The NWO was announced for the 2020 class. The world ends up getting shut down, and he doesn't get to go in. People are kind of like, oh, they're only going to put in Hall, Nash, and Hogan. And then I think X-Pac ended up getting, snuck in there with somehow, and people are like, well, is everybody in the NWO or just these guys? Why is Eric not a part of this? And then Eric ends up being named to go in his own, which was kind of good because he had taken that executive job from the company, and then he had got fired from the executive job from the company, and he was, that was sooner than later. Not a lot of time had passed, and maybe there was bad blood between them or something like that, but him getting put in the Hall of Fame was pretty damn cool, man. WCW, NWO, he's running WWE. That was a lot longer than I ever thought it was going to be. Makes me think of the Shane McMahon rumor of him joining AEW. But I'll leave it on this. It ended up, not being groundbreaking, but for 4 weeks in the middle of summer, Who Killed WCW was pretty good.